Okay, guys, thanks for bearing with me for a second. I know this is kind of a unusual subject for my channel, and I'm also trying to test out this microphone and see because people are telling me that my audio is always okay. So that is actually better, huh? That's good. Okay, now if I can just get my light at the right height. Okay, cool. So, if you guys have followed my channel for a long time, you know that I've struggled a lot with health issues for decades, actually. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've learned and also offer some etiquette for people that live with people or have to interact with people that have chronic illnesses because people really do a lot of damage. And I think one of the biggest issues for people that have chronic fatigue syndrome and that have um, like Lyme disease, things that are invisible. The number of people that I mean, you can see it in their eyes that they think that you're making it up or that you're mentally ill. In fact, I think I just got written off by another person. Also, we become dependent upon medications, and a lot of people, when they hear the word withdrawal, they just assume that you're a drug addict. They don't understand that if you're just taking a necessary amount of a pain medication. And in the case of tramadol, the last thing that I got physically dependent upon, I never got high off of it once. That's not the point at all. I just wanted to get out of bed, right? So, as some of you guys know, also we got hacked recently, and I think the only person out there that would have helped us through the holidays got wind, I think, of this tramadol withdrawal that I was dealing with, and uh, it's kind of written me off. So, the consequences of just, oh, and, we're definitely going to talk about opioids because I was really thinking about this today and how, that's one of the most difficult parts of it for people with Lyme's disease and sometimes chronic fatigue syndrome and other things that require these medications is that you have to make a choice. Your life sucks and you have no quality of life and you don't enjoy doing anything, or you're addicted to opioids forever. And I realized today that if I had continued to take opioids, it probably would have been better. Like the last 4 years of my life, I would have gotten more done. I would still be doing the things that I enjoy. I probably would have made it back to the States by now. Um, so it's a really hard decision to make. It's a really difficult thing to navigate because if it's really bad, you have to make some really hard decisions. So let's um, let's talk about exactly what happened to me because I think it's a pretty common scenario. I still haven't really ever gotten like a specific diagnosis. Um, I don't know. Do I need to hold this? Does it still work? If it's maybe if I put the other thing in there. There we go. That's probably good. They don't really stay though. Um, Now everything's nice and muffled because I have to have the volume down on the computer. So, anyways, I was like 21 years old. I had just moved out to Colorado, and I was fine. And one day I was driving home from town, and we were getting ready to pass a gas station, luckily. And suddenly there was this excruciating pain in my stomach, and I knew that if I didn't make it to a toilet within a matter of seconds, that it was going to be a serious disaster. And luckily I did. But it was pretty alarming because it was weird, And then it happened again a few days later, just randomly. And I didn't really think that much of it. I just thought, whatever, I picked up some bacteria or something. And then a few days after the second instance of this, my hand started to burn, as if, I mean, like serious pain, really, really serious pain. And so it went away after maybe an hour or so. And we were moving to this wonderful little barn that had been converted into living quarters, this big field by the river in Colorado. And The first night that I was there, it happened again. Only this time it was like my whole arm, and we were also watching the house of the person below us, and they had video games. So I thought I could go down there and take my mind off of it with some video games, and that didn't work, and it was absolutely excruciating. So um, I went to lay down, and I woke up in the middle of the night, just probably already screaming bloody murder. Like it was as if someone had poured gasoline on me from head to toe and lit me on fire. And so and it didn't stop. Um, so day one, and also I had flu symptoms. Like I was congested, not coughing or vomiting, but very queasy, extremely weak, lots of phlegm, right? So I went into the shower and I had like this weird rash it was like in rectangles sort of, and they would flash like if you've ever done acid or mushrooms, there's that pattern that will kind of like fade in and out. And this rash was doing that. And I had never heard of anything like that. I did not understand what was happening. And I coughed, and this rubbery ball that had some blood on it, and it was like I still to this day I can't imagine what it was. It was as if I had coughed up a piece of my lung or my brain or something. It was this like gross orange, uh, like you could smush it, but it was almost hard, and it was huge, like a golf ball. And so at this point, I'm thinking like, man, something really fucked up is going on here. And the guy that lived there with us, this was during a West Nile scare. There was a lot of West Nile in Colorado at the time, and my roommate had actually gotten it. So I'm thinking, okay, well, it's West Nile. I'll probably be okay in a few days. But then days and days and days and days went by, no sleep. I could not sleep, not a wink. I would just thrash, thrash, and thrash and scream. And eventually it settled down to the point where the pain was manageable enough that I could sort of try to go to work. So I started going to work, and I'm like leaning on the register to, stay up while I'm ringing people. I was a cashier at a health food store, and so runny nose all the time and stuff. And so I realized that, or someone that worked there had some Percocets, and I was like, please give them to me. And I took them, and I was almost fine. And so that was when I discovered that I could take opiates or opioids, and I could live an almost normal life. And this was a really, really bad discovery. So I started going to doctors and going to doctors and getting all these tests. My mom flew out from Virginia, and I had a colonoscopy, and I had blood work, and all this stuff, and they didn't find anything wrong. And I think in the back of my mom's mind, she's thinking maybe I'm just crazy or something. She was, nuts herself. So a lot of the things that you'll hear in this story, just to preface it with that fact, because it's not entirely, it's not you, and it wasn't me in the situation in a lot of these cases with this stuff. But she tried to help for a while. And the only thing that was ever found that was odd was that I had way too many red blood cells, which was an indication of an infection somewhere. But without health insurance, basically in the United States, you are never 1970 COVID, dude. What are you talking about? It was 1990. I'm 40, not 60. um, so where was I at with this monster story? Okay, so if you're in the United States and you don't have health insurance, they give no fucks. Like you can just go die. It's not doctors. You can go to emergency rooms and they'll humor you, But if you really need help, you're just not getting it. And I wasn't insured, and the health insurance was insanely expensive. I was a cashier. Um, and so I just started to. No doctors would give me opiates, which was the only thing that gave me any relief. And here I am, like 21 years old. I don't want to get high, really. I just wanted to be able to still play the guitar and sleep sometimes and not be in pain. It was excruciating. But doctors, with my long hair and everything, I guess they just assumed I was just trying to get drugs. And so I had to buy them on the streets. And eventually, this led to getting physically addicted, which actually, when I quit the first time, I didn't notice any withdrawal really. So the physical addiction is really later in the story. Because I wasn't trying to get high, and that really helped me as far as like the addiction stuff goes. I had a lot of friends. I know what that's like, where they're wanting to nod out and obliterate themselves all the time, and that's just never been me. I want to function, So that did help, but it doesn't save you completely. After a while, you will have withdrawals. So doctors find nothing wrong. And then eventually, if the painkillers weren't available, I would just buy whatever they had. So it might be Xanax, which didn't help as much, but it was better than nothing. And black tar heroin, which honestly, smoking a little bit of weak black tar heroin seemed a lot less toxic than the way that the pharmaceutical drugs made me feel. And it's actually biologically, it actually makes sense. If it's not cut with fentanyl or whatever, it's actually less toxic for your organs, at least, than a lot of the pharmaceuticals. On a side note, they really should have just left opium alone, because it was not really the pharmaceuticals that they actually make are far worse than opium was, for sure, uh, and more addictive and all of that. I mean, in fact, if you go to a clinic to get off of opioids, oftentimes they will tell you to go get back on the heroin so they can get you off the Suboxone. Sorry, I meant to say Suboxone. So on top of all this, though, I was trying to do all of the natural dietary things that I could. I tried eating tons of hot peppers in everything I ate for a while, just seeing if I could burn it out. I started making these crazy superfood soups with like barley and seaweed and every like tons of garlic and just all of the medicinal stuff I could think of to cram in there. I ate only organic already, anyways, before all this happened. Um, but and it was torture because this is how Lyme disease works. And by the way, I was never really Lyme disease tests are really inaccurate, and I don't know if I've ever even had one. There's almost no point. But with Lyme disease and chronic fatigue and a lot of these other illnesses, they come and go. So that was hell too, because after I think like 2 or 3 weeks the first time, the symptoms just kind of vanished, and so I thought I was better, and then it would come back, and that was the worst. It it was really difficult to wake up and realize that, um, Fernando, that wasn't really an ongoing relationship, and actually during the period when I knew um, Night Horse, I was in remission, which sometimes happens for even 6 months. I've had periods where you don't have a single symptom for like 6 months. And this is one of the things that with chronic fatigue syndrome and Lyme disease and stuff, because there are these periods of remission, it's one of the things that makes family members suspicious that there's not actually something wrong with you, because they come to see you and you're fine. You're hiking and you're doing all this stuff, and there doesn't seem to be any problems. And so uh, they, and it's understandable that they would doubt it, but that's really one of the most difficult things about this is when people say to me like, "Well, you look fine," I want to punch them right in the face. Honestly, like it takes everything that I have not to hit them, no matter who it is, because the effort that it takes for me to just like get out of bed in the morning is like, you know what I mean? When your life is this constant struggle to just to even want to be alive, and people say shit like that, it's really difficult to not kill them. even if they're well-meaning, it says, "Oh, so by the way, don't do that shit. If you know somebody with chronic fatigue or Lyme, do not minimize what they're going through in any way." Um, we had a friend come out and visit one time that was doing that to me a lot. Like, "Oh, do you really need to sleep 14 hours a day?" No, I need to sleep 24 hours a day, but unfortunately, I have to get out of bed sometimes. Um, and so, that's been my life for well, I was talking about all the natural remedies and stuff. They didn't help. Nothing had any. It made no difference. Changes, lifestyle changes, whatever. It's not like it did anything at all to mitigate the suffering or the symptoms when they were bad. And then I would have these periods where sorry, it's getting hot. Where it would be symptom free. I would be symptom free, and um, I'd stop taking the opiates and everything, and I would think I was in the clear. And honestly, if I really examine it, I do think it's likely that I have re-triggered this stuff. One thing I can't claim is that I have maintained a lifestyle that's totally when I'm symptom free, I have done things that potentially could trigger, like consuming alcohol. If I could get out of it this time, I wouldn't, and at this point in my life, to catch up to the present day, uh, and all of this led to prison, and it's difficult for me to have a regular job because I never know if I'm going to be functional or not. The brain fog that comes with the symptoms is pretty debilitating. If you guys follow my channel, you'll notice that sometimes I'm very clear and lucid and articulate, and other times there's like the weird pauses, and I'll kind of space out all of a sudden. And so, one of the things I have been able to figure out is that inflammation is one of the main issues. And so neuroinflammation is um, part of that. And I'm convinced that with Lyme disease and chronic fatigue and all of these kind of things, that the brain fog that everyone talks about is a result of neuroinflammation. And so, yeah, I mean, to say that, it's destroyed my life, I guess, is not uh, uh, um, an exaggeration. Sometimes I think about like where I may have ended up if I hadn't gotten this chronic illness. Um, and then, you end up with all of these guilt complexes because I'm not present for my son. He's a toddler. I have no energy for that. I can't throw him around, and I just want to be left alone most of the time. And I definitely don't have the energy to do much of anything. And it's only recently that I started to notice that people that like are my age and older are still interested in sex. And it was almost like this revelation because it doesn't even cross my mind. It's just not it's a non-issue. And I've always been kind of like that, but I think that once your energy level drops below a certain point, there's nothing extra. And so, you know, I I feel really bad about all the things my partner misses. Um, and then, of course, bad decisions are made because of the inflammation. What happens when you're really exhausted is that the conscious mind just sort of it's just disengages, and there's not really much you can do about it. And then, decisions are made that you would never, ever, ever make in your normal state of consciousness, or fully present state. Um, and so, the fatigue and the brain fog, um, the consequences on your ability to just do basic functioning and um, hold down a job or whatever is It's pretty bad. And so, for a number of years, I did get to the point where I was more or less functional because I had kratom. And so, before we came to Ecuador, I had a band that was practicing honestly like 60 hours a week sometimes while I was working, and I had a big grow that I was responsible for, and so I could juggle, and I was supporting everyone on the property. So I had, a BMW X5 and a Yukon Denali, and I was supporting like four grown men and whoever happened to just wander into the farm, all the big-hearted miscreants that would wander onto the property that, not really just random strangers, but people that were just kind of drifters that we liked, and I would just support everyone. Um, and so since we've come to Ecuador, it has progressively gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where for the last 2 years, I've spent probably 60% of my life in bed. Um, and it's really, really difficult to convince myself to even try to find the drive to even want to be alive, because the physical sensations that accompany this and the lack of energy, and I have no interest in anything that I used to love. Like, I don't want to play music unless I'm getting paid to because I have to, or anything really. Like, I don't want to do anything that I don't have to do. um I don't enjoy it. I can't. There's just no. um it's extremely difficult to deal with. And I have found some help, though, and we should talk about that. There are things that you can do, and I think this is something that everyone really needs to focus on in our culture, Western culture. Our food is largely garbage, especially if it's mass produced. It's not even food, it is food grade chemical byproducts, and there's even food grade styrofoam is used as a filler. This is a petroleum product you're eating. McDonald's food, someone finally got it to be labeled as like dangerously toxic. And do me a favor too, you guys, while I'm thinking about it, please like, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, or you can send support to the crypto wallet address or the Zelle or PayPal. We really do appreciate it because, speaking of health problems, the last 2 years completely destroyed us financially, and I learned how to trade crypto, and then we got hacked and someone took everything. So we're back to zero. I think we have about $4, and I'm in no state to do anything about it. To be perfectly honest. Um, but anyways, it is better. It is better. If you guys had seen me like 2 months ago, I would like get out of bed, walk down to the main house, and there were like it was like a dining hall, and I would just like lay on the table, and it's like I'm so heavy all the time and stuff. Um, and so the one thing, oh sure, another $200,000 in testing. I mean, what I've had so many tests on two different continents over 30 years. Like, what do you mean testing? What you know what I mean? It's, I mean, yeah, sure, I get it, but I mean, I've done that plenty. But anyways, the one thing that has helped, this was supposed to be a companion with the plant medicine tea that I posted earlier. If you guys haven't seen that, go check it out. Uh, so the things that I have figured out that I could do that helped, and this is useful for anyone, I think, because I see. I thought you were telling me to go get more tests. I was like, of course, dude, but I'm a little bit burnt out on tests. Um, but anything that's inflammatory, we all should just cut it out of our diet, because I think that what I've discovered is going on, and it's crazy. Don't trust your doctors. I'm not saying that they can't ever help you. I'm not totally against Western medicine, but not one of the normal doctors that I went to, or the naturopath, suggested that I try to adjust my diet for inflammation. None of them did. And that is the only thing I've been able to do that had any noticeable effect. And so I cut out coffee. I started to limit bread consumption. Honestly, it probably should go completely. The sugar, especially refined sugar, cut that way down. And so the effect of that is that although I'm not entirely cured, I was so bloated when I woke up, like everything was so inflamed that I was like tight around my midsection, and not like bloated from gas, but just that I was so tense everywhere that it was kind of like being bloated. Uh, and so when I started to change my diet, I did make some progress with that. Um, and then the tea that I made, you guys can check that out. Most of you won't have access to all of the ingredients. I don't know if some of them can not be found online. Well, I know one of them is not, because, by the way, you guys, if you do watch the video, if on the off chance that any of you know what Rabo the weird ass parasitical plant that um, is featured in the video is, let me know. I mean, by is, I mean Latin name, because I've searched Google. There's nothing. It seems like it's a very, very little known medicinal plant. It's very common in the jungles here at the Quechua markets and stuff. Everyone has it, and so yeah, check out that tea because that has really helped. One of the hardest things for people that have chronic health conditions like CFS and anything that really affects your energy level is that we want to consume tons of caffeine because I'm very driven, just right. I used to practice guitar 10 hours a day, like um serious, I'm not kidding, 10 hours a day for years, and still do other stuff, and I'm just constantly going, and I feel so guilty and so bad if I stop for even a minute. I mean, of course, that's gotten much slower over the last couple of years, but the point is that you just want to take stuff to keep going, and uh, after a certain point, you don't even care really. You just have to keep going somehow. Um, but here in Ecuador, that's not really working. And as I was saying earlier in the stream, I didn't want to get on the subject at the time, but I honestly, if I had it to do over again, because my goal was to stop taking kratom, stop taking opiates, not have any crutches at all, get totally healthy, beat this thing completely, and then move on with my life. It's not what happened. In fact, even though I have improved overall from a couple of months ago, uh, relative to um, where I was when I fixed a lot of the symptoms, I'm getting worse again. Um, so it's really difficult, and the reality is that if I had something like oxycodone or Dilaudid or morphine or whatever in relatively moderate doses, I'd be playing guitar all the time. I would have a sex life again. I would enjoy going for hikes. Um, so you know, it's really difficult because there's a lot of stigma, I think, attached to opioids. Opiate withdrawal is one of the most horrendous things that you can ever go through, but it's hard for me to say that if I could go back and start the last 4 years over again, if I wouldn't have just taken the opiates so that I didn't have to miss out on so much of my life. And that sucks. But, and that's also why it's important for us to make sure that we don't perpetuate stigmas. Um, the people that have written me off, or that didn't send us any holiday support, even though they know that we just got hacked for all of our money, and they're pretty wealthy. Um, because I got physically addicted to a tramadol because they think this is a drug addict. You know what I mean? Um, And also, people are just toxic as fuck, anyways. I think as I've gotten older and I've gotten the more conscious I become, the more I really realize how much it's like a bunch of lobsters in a pot, like pulling each other down, crabs in a pot, or whatever people just really want to tear you down, and a lot of them, and so much judgment and artifice Um, it's funny, I lived most of my life outside of society and trying to integrate back into it. Like people think that the people on the fringes are fucked up. No, I hate to tell you this, but I have gotten far cynical, paranoid, um, scammed, threatened since I've tried to start integrating with normal people than I ever did in 20 years as an outlaw. Like the normal society that everyone thinks is, you know, somehow safer and like you're better off with government regulating you and stuff. From my experience, that is the most like bass backwards thing you could possibly imagine. Um, but anyway, so the tea, uh, there are a number of things that you need to do in order to regulate your uh, mood, your attitude, your state of mind, because that is where things get dangerous. I have to talk myself into wanting to be alive. Um, at like seriously, like at the crossroads of making that kind of decision, um, 2 or 3 times a day on average, I would say. So you have to, and part of it is the malabsorption. And, if you're inflamed, you're not getting nutrients. And so there's a sort of domino effect of issues. And so eating foods that are going to support healthy serotonin production is tremendously important. So that tea that I concocted has ayahuasca in it, but it's not a psychoactive amount. Mapacho tobacco, which I know a lot of people like, okay, this is supposed to be a healthy tea and you're putting tobacco in it. That is totally a Western stigma. You have to just think about how, vitamin B17 is cyanide, but very, very small amounts of it is medicine, and a lot is poison. And so, it's very common with indigenous people here to use tobacco as a medicine. And one of its fundamental purposes is that it stabilizes your emotions. And so, if you're dealing with some kind of chronic illness and you're struggling not to become suicidal, uh, small amounts of tobacco in this tea is going to be helpful. Also, you're probably going to have issues with candida getting out of control, and parasites can take root in an unhealthy host much more easily. And a little bit of nicotine will ensure that those things all die. And of course, all of the ingredients in my tea are optional. But then there's a ton of turmeric, um, guayusa, which has tons of antioxidants and some caffeine, but it doesn't give you the um, pH problems that coffee did. Um, the difference between when I was drinking a lot of coffee to keep going and how I feel now in terms of like queasiness and digestion and all of that kind of stuff, it really like you really have to watch out for your caffeine consumption, which is really difficult if you're living with chronic illness. And I only have about a half an hour more, and I want to make sure that um, well, I think I did kind of talk about that, how, you really need to be careful how you interact with people that are dealing with this kind of stuff, because minimization is a terribly toxic thing that people tend to do when you're not laying in bed with cancer, obviously dying, and so people just say a lot of really awful shit. Um, and it's incredible. Like this I've been talking for a half an hour and I'm running out of energy. It's not that my voice is tired, like it's just getting difficult. So it's pretty crazy. But what I was saying is that the main thing is the inflammation, and I think the serotonin production. And I think that microdosing psilocybin, especially the stammet stack, where you're using niacin, which if you're having problems with addiction, alcoholism in particular, if you have struggled with depression, your neural pathways actually sort of shrivel up on the end, and they are impediments to the growth of new neurons. And so the reason that niacin is in there is that it actually has like this pruning effect and shears off all of those dried, wrinkled up neurons. Um, and so that allows the new neurons that are being created by the neurogenesis well, you know what I'm trying to say. The neurogenesis catalyst property of psilocybin, they need somewhere to go. So that's why the stamets stack has niacin to go with the psilocybin, right? And so the psilocybin is going to restore help you to re-engineer new habits. So if you have to make dietary changes, you have to make attitude adjustments, you have to do all this stuff, you're going to be able to create new habits more rapidly if you have this neuroplasticity in your brain. And so there's another ingredient. Oh, and then lion's mane. Lion's mane is so effective at catalyzing neurogenesis that they're actually looking at it as a treatment for people that have dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and that's actually showing great efficacy. So I think for any person that's struggling with any kind of addiction, with any sort of neuroinflammation, which is basically where the damage from alcoholism is coming from, uh, the Stamets stack is going to be a tremendously powerful tool. And if you don't want to pay the high ticket for the actual Stamets stack, it's something that's very easy to make at home. He does not like protect the ratios. I don't know them off the top of my head, but you can look them up. Um, and that's I'm sure that's an essential thing for just about anyone, And it really strikes me as almost ridiculous to go into the dietary stuff because I think everyone knows it, and it's just a matter of whether or not you're going to adhere to it. The refined sugar and the excessive caffeine and all this stuff. But I can tell you for what it's worth that if you do burn your health and you lose it and it doesn't come back, your life is over basically. I mean, to a large extent. And you're going to wish that you had not smoked cigarettes or drank so many energy drinks or whatever it is that did you in. And honestly, it's if it's like something like chronic fatigue syndrome, which is just what I call whatever happened to me because there's no real answers. Uh, it seems like it would almost be better to just get cancer or something and just die because after 10 or 15 years of just this relentless uh, progression, slow but steady progression into disability. It just seems evil. Um, and yeah, so basically that's that's the message. I mean, we undervalue diet. That's the main lesson that all of this has taught me is that you have to have a relationship with your body. And I guess we could talk about some of the psychosomatic elements of this, and I don't mean psychosomatic in the sense that you're a hypochondriac and you think that something's wrong with you and it's not. A lot of people in alternative medicine believe that all physical issues have some kind of underlying spiritual or emotional basis. I don't think that's true. I think that very oftentimes they do. I don't think you can make those kind of generalizations. I think there's order in the universe, but there's also chaos. So, sometimes things happen because of, that kind of cause, and other times it's just chaos. It's just entropy. It's just random chance. It's just bad genetics. Um, but at the same time, I have seen cures in people as a result of taking ayahuasca that make no sense in the biophysical of it. And when I drink and I actually feel, is my battery dying? What's going on here? No. I actually feel kind of guilty about this, but I sometimes do get relief for like months at a time from drinking ayahuasca, and I don't know why. But the best that I've felt since before this all happened was probably after like my third or fourth ayahuasca ceremony, and I did in that drastically improved state for a very, very long time. I don't think I even noticed at the time. You know, you after a while with these remissions, you just kind of start to take it for granted again, which is remarkably frightening. But it happens. You know, I wonder how many of these people that pop on and go off right away, or if they see this Baphomet thing behind me, and you know, sometimes I feel like I should take it down, but it's just so stupid that people would like if they pop on and see a picture of Jesus behind me, no one's going to mind. And Christianity has done more horror in this world than Baphomet would ever think about. I didn't get to this in my last live stream about the evils of Christianity, but they're always talking about how all of these kids are hurt by Satanists. And actually, if you look at the statistics, your child is like 10,000 times as likely to be raped or murdered by a Christian than by a Satanist. So it's just ridiculous. And this isn't Satan anyways. This is just Baphomet. It's a different thing. So it's like my stubborn, if it costs me a bunch of views, whatever, I like it. And, I'm definitely not evil. So where do I get my subs from? People watching and subscribing. We were demonetized a while back, and so it really, really cut my viewers down because they bury it, and the algorithm no longer prioritizes it. So, yeah, we get no money. So, once again, you guys support the channel. There's options for you in the chat and in the description. We really do need your support at this point. Incredibly brutal couple of months, man. Getting hacked and having your entirety of your livelihood drained in a second twice in 1 week is um, it was really incredibly bad. So I'm trying to think if there's anything really important that I've missed. Something did occur to me about people and how they deal with people with chronic illness that is not it's not kosher. See that brain fog, man. It's hard for me to uh, recall stuff. And if you guys have any questions or anything, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the plants that I think everyone should take as preventative uh, uh, medicines. Uña de gato is extremely uh, widely available, right? So tests have been done on it, and it is remarkable the spectrum of efficacy for this plant. There are some indications that long-term use, even just 3 weeks, could be detrimental. Um, well, thank you, Poo Poo. I appreciate that shit. Um, So the uña de gato, that is something that it's anti-tumor, it's anti-spasmodic, it's immune boosting. I'm not even going to try to go over the list because it's really long, and studies done recently confirmed all of it, which is remarkable to me. I honestly expected to discover that the folk applications would like less of them would turn out to have a medically verifiable basis than was actually the case. It was like basically the NCIB, is that what it is? Their report said that indigenous claims basically all verified. And that has been the case with every one of these plants that I've looked at so far. The mono de rabo is very good for inflammation as well, and prostate, and a lot of other stuff. But I don't think you guys are going to be able to get it because apparently no one even knows that it exists or something. I don't know. This is a mission that I'm definitely determined to get to the bottom of. See what the hell mono de rabo de mono is. Um, I appreciate that, Fernando. And then guayusa, you guys, if you don't already drink it, I know it's like super expensive in the States, but we have a huge tree right outside the window here. It is loaded with vitamin C. It has quite a bit of caffeine, nicotinic acid, vitamins, all sorts of vitamins, and a whole bunch of bioactive um, what are they called? Phyla, not phylanols, whatever, man. Look it up. The guayusa is super good for you. And the Quechua here use it for lucid dreaming. Of course, you don't drink it right before sleep, but it's just the constant consuming of it. Different tribes here will wake up at super early in the morning. The Shuar will drink it and drink it and drink it and drink it until they vomit every morning. Uh, in fact, when I was going through my really intensive period with ayahuasca, I didn't like to vomit. And my first ceremony, I guess I said to the shaman, or because you pass the talking stick around, everyone says what happened to them or whatever. And so I I said, well, I asked Pachamama not to make me vomit because I didn't want to vomit. And the Shwar, it's really, really important that you vomit. And so he just shot me this look with his eyes all wide, and he was horrified. And so the next night when I got back to the teepee, there was a huge kettle of guayusa and a coconut cut in half. And he's like, please drink my medicine and vomit. And I actually fought with him at first. I was like, no, I'm not. I don't want to. It's terrible. I hate vomiting. And eventually he convinced me that I just had to go do it. And I bowl after bowl of guayusa. And honestly, it was one of the best. Like ayahuasca vomiting is not like any other kind of vomiting. It's a completely different thing. Um, the sounds that you make and stuff, it's impossible to describe. And to our Western sensibility is the idea that you're able to just like expel this damage and trauma and stuff and just vomit it in the lawn and walk away and it's just gone from your life seems incredibly weird, but it's true. And I remember after like the fifth or sixth time of vomiting in this bush, I looked up into the stars and I just thought they had never seemed so beautiful, and everything was so crystal clear, like this haze had been lifted from my perceptual apparatus. Had some greater cognitive clarity. Uh, so, I mean, I know I've been hella doom and gloom at times here, but ultimately, what I'm saying is that um, there's always hope. And I mean, I'm sure you can see me literally choking on those words because the conviction. I honestly wanted this live stream to be more positive than it was, but I have a hard time with bullshitting, and I am a little bit short on hope at the moment. I think that us getting hacked and the fact that we have like $4 in our bank account, probably the stress is contributing to this like symptom increase. Um, so I wonder how I'm gonna feel when I turn that around. um, Somehow. Um, but I guess the positive thing that I can say is that relative to where I was at a couple of months ago, where I was just sure I was going to die, uh, I'm surprised that I have gotten this much better, even though it's not perfect. Um, so, you never know what's going to happen. Another thing that really pushes me is that you know, we don't know what kind of therapies are going to come along eventually. I feel like if I could get a stem cell therapy, I could probably fix whatever's wrong with me. Even if they don't know exactly what it is, I think that stem cell therapy could do it. So you always have to tell yourself and people that you're trying to support, um, that have these kind of issues, that you don't know what's going to happen in the future, and your consciousness is going to have, some dramatic impact on your physicals, your physiology, your biology. So you just have to keep reminding yourself that you don't know what lies around the corner. And I have experienced miracles over and over and over and over and over again in my life. I'm not even happy about how many of them I've needed, but it's something that I think is consistent. Uh, it's not that miracles are the exception to the rule. Miracles are the rule. Look around you. I mean, the universe is literally made of miracles. And when someone tells you something is impossible, you would do well to just point out that the universe itself is impossible. And it has to be impossible in order for it to exist because of this dualistic nature of everything, right? But metaphysics aside, it is quite literally impossible. Only relenting in its impossibility at the point that it came into existence. So, there's always the probability, not just the possibility, that something miraculous is going to happen, because something miraculous already did happen. This has always baffled me about shallow people. Like, how can you scoff at the possibility of aliens or gods or whatever, when you already are confronted with creation? You're a fool to limit the parameters of what you think is potentially available to us in terms of experience. Um, so, when I'm at my worst, and when it seems hopeless and impossible, I just you just have to think like that, and this is why we all have to stay connected to the mystery. This is why a spiritual dimension to our being is absolutely essential. No matter how we interpret the word spiritual, um, at the end of the day, some kind of relationship with that dimension of our existence is, I think, essential to living any really fulfilling, constructive life. And I say this all the time, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but when you look out into the landscape of the United States, then you see all the school shootings in the oceans testing positive for Xanax, and all of this stuff, man. I mean, the U.S. consumes what, like 80% of the world's pharmaceuticals, and most of them are for emotional and psychological issues. And why is that? What is at the root of that? It's a lack of purpose, and it's a belief that there's no reason for the universe, and it's the whole materialistic, rationalist, reductionist narrative is literally killing people. It's killing their souls, and it's killing the earth, and it's just, and it's not true, you know. Um, and neither are the religions. So don't think that because I'm saying that you should have a spiritual dimension that you should go get religion, because that's they don't even have a relationship in my mind. In fact, if you watch my last live stream, I think I can demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that religions are actually engineered to curtail spiritual development and genuine contact with the universal mind, or however you want to think of your divinity. Um, Yeah, well, Fernando, I do have a plant medicine ceremony scheduled. Hopefully, I feel good enough, but it's going to be like a moderate San Pedro with Wilca seed at the end, and that does help. Every time I have had a psychedelic experience, it has lifted my spirits and pushed me a little bit. They're remarkably powerful tools, and honestly, And I wish I'd said this a long time ago for when there were other people that might have needed to hear it, but because most of you guys have heard it before. uh, the one thing that probably could have saved me from the years of opioid abuse is access to good, clean LSD. And I think I knew that in the back of my head, but what happens when you become addicted to these dark side drugs is that there's something in your being that does this auto avoid thing. I mean, people that I know that have gotten strung out on heroin, they will start avoiding psychedelics and marijuana and stuff. And I think that it really would have saved me a lot of this if I had maintained a relationship with psychedelics over the years. And I did lose that for a number of decades. And I almost, you know, being ill, chronically ill for decades has definitely cost me a lot of progress in life. But I honestly think that my discontinuing my relationship with psychedelics for 15 years probably was more harmful than the chronic illness, because a lot of the things that I did that exacerbated um, the inflammation and different elements of the illness, uh, I wouldn't have done. So I think it's really important that we do have some kind of schedule, uh, and that we have contact with the universal mind, or whatever, however you think of your spiritual dimension. You need to make sure that that's what holidays are really good for. They're like markers where it's like, okay, everyone remind yourself that you're connected to everything, that there's something bigger, the real purpose of existence and all of this. There were these days marked where everyone would come together and do that. And for example, what Christianity has done to the world is taken that out of the equation. So I mean, people remember about family and like being nice and giving shit to poor people or whatever. But I think that holidays they're supposed to be much, much deeper than that, and they should be a time of transcendent reflection and connection to the eternal, um, you know, immaterial spark of divine consciousness that permeates the entire fabric of space and time. And taking that out of the equation, out of our lives, it should be part of our daily consciousness, really. Um, Luckily for me, one things I've had going for me is that I can't get away from that aspect of things, to the point that the rest of it suffers. I've been out of balance in that way to where I'm in another world all the time. So I don't have to worry about losing connection with that. I lose connection with my body. I lose connection with the material. I've done all these crazy things and I have almost no evidence of it, because it never occurred to me to monetize things. I wasn't worried about proving any of it later. Nowadays people would be, including me, would have their phone out, and but luckily I didn't get connected to the internet until fairly recently. So um, so I was just never concerned with that kind of thing. And like I was saying, it's not entirely good, because I'm pretty smart. I could have set myself up pretty well by now, but it's almost impossible for me to consider that element of things. I don't want anything to do with it, and it's a very strong instinctual drive. It feels very dishonest to try to capitalize on anything for me, and it consciously, I don't necessarily even agree with that, but I can't help but operate that way, kind of. Um, and when I talk about how this chronic illness, oh, that's what it is. There's the victim shaming, man. Earlier, I was trying to remember what is the other thing that people do that is, and this is where toxic spirituality comes into the fold. um, people, it's almost like, I had a friend that almost died in India, and she said all the doctors believed in karma, so they were all standing around laughing at everyone because they have no empathy for your suffering at all, because they believe that karma put you in that position, and whatever is happening is exactly what is supposed to happen to you, and so that's it. And um, like when we got hacked and we had all of our money stolen, the number of people that acted like we must have done something to, and not even just like it's your fault, but like the universe is whatever. Like, you don't do that shit. Just shut up. Don't say that stuff, man. And when someone's sick, people do it a lot too. They're like, oh, well, there's something you haven't dealt with, and you know, it's and I guess part of what's so frustrating about it is most of it's not coming from a place of wisdom. It's coming from a place of regurgitating stuff that you read online, or that a lot of people who are spiritual believe, and then so people adopt that belief, and then they end up saying stupid shit to their chronically ill friend, like, you deserve this, basically, is the underlying message. You must have done something to bring this upon yourself. And some of you may not be ready for this conversation yet, but it's just like saying to a woman that got raped that it's her fault. Maybe your skirt shouldn't have been so short. You know what I mean? It's incredible how many people think, and they'll be smug while they're doing it because they think it's part of their badge of like spiritual development, that they're blaming you for the tragedies that have befallen you. And I hate to tell you guys, but spiritual awareness, and you understand consciousness and psychology, and you know what you're doing, and you know what you're saying, you know why you're doing it. So it's just hilarious that people think that it's like evidence of their spiritual development, when in fact it's really proof that they're not actually spiritually evolved at all, and that they're just repeating shit that they've heard, which is, a record player can do that. It's not any indication of development. Quite the contrary, I would say. So but I'm not saying that I didn't do anything to cause it either, to be fair. And I think that as far as the underlying emotional stuff, I'm only going to share this with you because it may help you. It may help you to actually say this to someone else that needs to hear it at some point. And so my mother will abuse is pretty severe. And so the feminine is, the mind works in symbols, and all of those symbols are metaphors, right? They're like living metaphors. Symbols are like alive in the mind. Uh, and so the feminine is connected to the body, the earth, right? All that kind of stuff. And so my neglect and lack of a relationship, and probably not listening to signals from my body when I was pouring coffee, down in the buckets, and taking all these pills, and not noticing that they're actually exacerbating the issues, um, that probably did contribute to this illness. And it does have a psychological or spiritual basis, because my mother's attitude towards male sexuality and men having that effect on me, so that I am not connected to the body. I'm not connected to sexuality. And so for me to miss signals from the body, and to not, have this positive relationship with it, is going to lead to illness. And so I just wanted to mention that, because it is true that a lot of this kind of stuff, especially chronic illness, does have as its basis some kind of psychological or emotional experience. But at the same time, it's really important not to be a toxic moron and do more harm than good, thinking that you are spiritually evolved and telling people that it's their karma, or that, it's it's just not that simple. So you just have to think about how you're communicating things to people that have these chronic illnesses, and really take the time to analyze what's coming out of your mouth before you let it go. um, do not profane the air with false speech. All these vibrations are going to travel through the universe for eternity, so you have to pay attention. Um, But speaking of healing, which I really hope I can get done because we're maybe going to go to Colombia and go to a retreat, or I'm going to work at a retreat and do ceremonies. They want to have trading school, which is something I'm also into, and music studio. And so it sounds great. And we definitely need to get out of Ecuador. So that's basically it, guys. But you have to, in order to make progress and survive this stuff, you have to deal with it on every level. You have to get your diet together. You have to take care of your brain health, which is something that in modern Western culture we have almost no consideration for. That it's actually something that we need to feed with nutrients, and that we need to protect from certain um, food ingredients like aluminum. Uh, and you do have to go through the process of psychoanalysis and spiritual, shadow integration and all that stuff. If you have any hope of really overcoming some severe shit like chronic fatigue. So yeah, my battery's dying, and I have to call these guys regarding the thing in Colombia, and so I have to go. But thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. I hope it wasn't too depressing, um, but I hope it was also sprinkled with something useful in case you happen to develop one of these conditions yourself, or somebody that has. Um, the first thing that you need to address, of course, is inflammation and diet, and then try to make my tea. So good night, guys, and we'll see you again soon.